number 15 of Tech with Briley. Today we'll be working on the Western Friend website. In this episode we will be focusing on code coverage. Our project is at 74% coverage. I'd say it's a little bit, well, not precise depending on how we define our critical path of code to be covered. For example, we're not testing the templates and the returned template responses for any of our views. And we're not testing any of our migration code, the content migration code, that is. Nonetheless, we're working through our models, any model properties or methods, as well as today, or in this session, the Wagtail page views, you could call them for lack of a better word. Typically in a Django project, you'll define models which interact with the database and give you a class-based interface to create, update, delete, and read data. You will define views that bring that data into context and render it into a template, and you define those templates, which is the third main Django component, to present the data and the information to the user, usually in the form of HTML. With Wagtail, it sort of combines a couple of the Django components into one. Your data model, if it inherits from the Wagtail page, will automatically create view functions and admin edit handlers, such as the forms and administration interfaces like listing content. It automatically generates those for you. It also wires up these model instances to URLs and serves those directly from the model, serves those URLs from the model. So it's combining the model and the view into one, as well as the administration interface, all into one sort of logical entity. They pretty much behave like normal Django views. They take a request, an HTTP request, and return an HTTP response. You just define them at the model level. We're in our models.py for the subscription, and we're inheriting from the Wagtail page model. There's a bit of a new perspective on a familiar concept once you put it into those terms. This is a view function and a data model. As we can see, I don't have any test coverage here. We're going to write some tests as if this were a regular Django view. And implicitly, normally the template is defined by the model name. However, you can also override that here. So we will stay hydrated and dive into the code. I've got a working branch here. Our models py here open in VS Code. We're going to be using GitHub Copilot and a bit of probably OpenAI GPT chat. Help us navigate this. Let's start with GitHub Copilot and see how familiar it is with the Wagtail codebase. So far, it's been pretty good. Django conventions say to write the tests in test.py. We will follow that convention. In order to help Copilot, we'll make sure our code is imported, in this case a model, subscription index page, and then we will create, it's going to be a bit tricky, but we'll need to create a test class. And I say it's going to be tricky because one thing I didn't mention is that this page model is hierarchical. It's based on Django Treebeard, and every page has to be created within a tree, site tree, that's associated with a Wagtail site instance, as a root page, and then you have to build all the way to the leaf node, which in today's session we will be testing this leaf node. I don't believe, I'm just thinking if there's a way I've tried this, there's probably a way, but not that I'm aware of creating this instance as an orphan and mocking any parent page types, which happen to be this home page. So that would allow me to not have to scaffold the entire tree. And we don't have any subpage types, but this is where you define your sort of hierarchy and the allowed places where you can put particular page type. It's like ornaments on a Christmas tree. You can only put some ornaments on the, you know, some are heavier, or you don't, I don't know, it's a bad analogy, I suppose. But nonetheless, in order to create a subscription index page, we have to have a home page. In order to create a home page, we need to have defined a site. It'd be cool if I could just create this subscription index page and automatically populate the Treebeard properties. The problem that would present is when we try to serve content through the view. One problem would be that we wouldn't have a URL path. The URL path is also defined by the page hierarchy. It really unifies the URL routing, the view function, and the model. And it's fairly elegant. Just presents some challenges when testing. So let's see what happens here, just to illustrate this problem we're going to face. Forgot to start our database server in the background. We're using, oh, it is already running, good. We're using Colima as an alternative to Docker UI. I think it's a little less resource intensive, uses less RAM. And then we have a Docker compose file that contains essentially a Postgres database service and a pgadmin if you need to get into the database. Those are both running here, pgadmin and Postgres. Good. We're on a branch, so now we can run a Python tests. And we're going to run the subscription tests. But we're going to access the subscription index test case, and we have some issues. That's missing a type annotation. There we go. Unfortunately, the Copilot and ChatGPT aren't really picking up on the fact that we're using type annotated Python. All right, so we're gonna get an error here, and it's a bit of a mysterious or opaque one. Well. Oh yeah, sorry, typo on my part. We're defining a test case class. We're going to run that. I'm going to run it with KeepDB this time. I think it'll have to recreate the database. Let's see what happens. We should, if I recall correctly, and having struggled through this in the past, get some, whoa, okay. We're not saving it, so if I tried saving it, we would get some errors about relating to Django Treebeard. However, since we have an instance here, I can test this serve function. Let's see what Copilot suggests for get context. Okay. So this request needs to be an HTTP request. context should include a form. So we'll see if Copilot can help me with the syntax around creating a mock HTTP request. We don't really need the user, but let's see how well that works. I might tell it that I'm using Django HTTP request. Oh, that's interesting. Using spec. I guess we haven't really used the HTTP request inside of this file, so Copilot's not really able to work with that. Now it should be fine. And it doesn't look like we need the user attribute, so this should be okay here. Let's save that. Context should have a form. Let's see what it says. If nope, wants to define another one. Now it's picking up on situation here. Okay, key error title. That's not correct in any case. The context variable should be called page. And page will have a title property. Title. It's page instance, so it'll have a title attribute. Or property. Yeah. Subscription forms. Subscription create form is not an instance of subscription form subscription create form. Huh. That's a weird one. However, it's the only one that's failing. Let me just comment this out real quick. Yeah, good. So let's ask for some help from this one. This is so weird. Control K, Command K, U. Command KU. I will not probably be able to get help from ChatGPT. It would be harder to provide ChatGPT enough, Google Copilot enough context here. My intuition at least says that. So let me try this out. Let's try a new chat here. A fresh one. Dot dot dot. Get context. Oh, did I go too far? Subscription index page. Serve, okay. I want to test both of those. Look at the test case. Get the following error. So if I rerun the test, maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but it really looks to me like these are the same classes. The error you're seeing suggests that the context form object is not an instance of subscription create form, but rather the class itself. This happens because a get context method in your subscription index page class assigns the class. Ah, ooh, nice. It's a bug. So, need to instantiate that. Wow. Boing. Assigns the class itself. Wow. Here's the part of the getContextMess method that does this. To create an instance of the class and assign it to the context, you should call the subscription create form like a function. Now, either my implementation is wrong or the assertion is wrong. This makes the implementation match the assertion. Let me double check the Django docs. That way, the form in the context is an actual form instance that you can fill out and validate, not the form class itself. That sounds like what I want. I can fill out and validate. As for how to adjust your test, you would still use the assert is instance to confirm that the test's context is form is a subscription create form. So that's correct. So I sort of asked the wrong question, but this is the key question that got me the good result. Why might I be getting that error? And it seems like we're on the right path with the test now. So we will rerun that. So, okay, so I don't need to change anything. I have the same assertion. Now I've got two passing tests. So cool. This will now pass because it's an instance of the form rather than the class itself. And the assert is instance method checks whether the first argument is an instance of the second argument. So it should work as you originally intended after you make this change. Hey, welcome Jean-Michel Rojas. Jean-Michel Rojas. Hello, sir, brother. Do you have any idea how I can access GPT-4 for free? I want to embed it in an aider to be more efficient with coding. Yes, I can kind of give you an indirect way of doing that. And I'll tell you the context. But the TLDR is use GitHub Copilot under an open source contributor license. Okay, so a bit more context. GitHub Copilot is a code assistant, code aid. it helps you become more efficient with coding. I'm not using it here, but I probably could have. And we'll demonstrate that in a minute after I just explain the rest of this. GitHub Copilot is baked into your development environment. You can access it here and ask it to do things like explain coding. Like if I highlight some code, I say, hey, explain this. Copilot will respond with a description of what's going on. That's just kind of a big one. Here's an explanation. If you're using JavaScript, it's got some extra features, but I'm going to hide these for just a moment. Here's an explanation for the code above. The get context is called by Django when it's time to render the HTML template. The return value of get context is a dictionary that represents all data that will be passed into the template. So it's essentially able to really help me understand this code. It also has a chat interface where you can essentially chat with it. How do I return a template from a Django view? My question is not quite correct, but it would be a template view or something like that. To return a template from a Django view, you can use the render function provided by Django. Here's an example of how you can use the render function to return a template from a Django view. So I asked the wrong question, but it understood what I was trying to do and gave me the right answer in this case. That you would render a template in a view function. So there's that. Copilot, to the best of my knowledge, although it's a little bit of a black box, is GPT. Whether or not GPT-4, I don't know. The quality of the answers is telling me it's probably a GPT 3.5, but at any point they could also allow you to use GPT-4 through GitHub Copilot. Now comes the part about the free access. As you're probably aware, GPT-4 is paid subscription. And GitHub Copilot is also a paid subscription. Honestly though, I know that there's people, varying means and price is really relative, and so I don't mean to imply anything, but I believe this is a good investment. It's, I think, around $10 per month. And the help it gives is invaluable. I mean, it just has really transformed the way I'm coding. So even, I mean, if in any way possible, you can afford the cost of the subscription. They might have sliding scale subscriptions. I don't know. I know that cost is very relative, and people's income and means it varies a lot. So that's it. I think this is a very good investment. Sliding scale, depending on where you're at and what your means are. However, they have a free version for open source developers. And what you can do is log in here. You log into your GitHub account. And I'm probably seeing a different page. Yeah, yes, exactly. Your school email. Yeah, that's right. So I'm sure there's some avenues to get this for free. The education discount is one as well as the open source avenue. Yeah, so just basically jump over here to Copilot. And yeah, let's go ahead and try using Copilot in this session to see, that way you'll have an idea of how it works. So I'll try it on the next task, which is essentially to test this. Context variable exists. All right, so we're gonna do just like we did with GPT, but only in Copilot. So essentially what I did, just to summarize with GPT, I gave it enough information about the existing code in the function I'm trying to test. And in this case, I had a test that was where I was making a mistake and it pointed out my mistake. So let's just do the same thing. You just give these models a prompt with enough information to go with. So in our prompt here for Copilot, we will say, given, let's see here, the following model definition. I'll try to recreate my prompt. Given the following subscription index, page, model. Definition which inherits from the Wagtail page model. Shift enter, I think you have to do on this one. Indentation, dot, dot, dot. Oh, now this is interesting. Oh, okay, tab. I'm gonna hit enter real quick. No, so gotta hit shift enter. So there it's telling me about the code because I prompted it incorrectly. Let's fix that prompt, and remembering to hit shift enter here. I wonder if there's a setting here where I can make shift enter submit and enter new line. Now notice it preserved my indentation, which because it's in a code editor, so they know that indentation matters, particularly in Python, but other programming languages. Now we're just going to bring in this get context method, which we're trying to test, which will be that. And okay, shift tab doesn't work, so it's not quite exactly like my one. You have to 4 backwards. No, that took me to the beginning. Anyway, test case. Subscription price components. And I'll show you another way of doing this as well. As I recognize this, now that we've narrowed it down in the previous test, then Copilot's actually going to be able to write this code for me in context, in situ of the tests at least. But in the case I needed the whole suite, here's the example. It gave me a whole test case, test get context. And so yeah, it's basically GPT 3.5 or 4. It's explaining the whole thing with the syntax highlighting and stuff. Yeah, so Copilot. That's why I'm using it in this whole series. It's just indispensable. It's worth especially if you can get it for free, which I'm actually, I qualify for the free plan under these open source projects. Subscription price components. It's asserting it is in there. Okay, now we wanted to actually assert that it is that it equals the subscription price component constant. We want to make sure we're checking the value of that as well, not just the presence, but the value. So that's one thing these models, they help you think more broadly, but sometimes they omit stuff, so you're still going to have to really engage with what you're doing, engaging with the task. But these are basically the assertions I want to make, and they are fairly self-explanatory, so I will just add them and make the import. Now here's the other way of doing that. Since we already had an existing test case, if I import these subscription price components from, I believe, the subscription models, they're already in our context, subscription price components. You can also prompt it here. Object, whatever. And there it had the right details. So both of those ways work. And for whatever reason, we had a bunch of red squiggles. And so this is sort of a twofer. We're getting we're asserting that it exists by asserting it equals a value. This would fail in the case that it doesn't exist as well. So let's go ahead and we'll run those tests, I mean. Very cool. So Jean-Michel Rojas, let me know if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but yeah, does that kind of help out with your question about GPT-4 specifically, or perhaps the Copilot avenue? Does that seem like a good fit for your coding journey? Let me know. But like I say, these tools have really helped me out. The comment method is way better. Yeah, I agree, because it's right here. The prompt is right here in the context. I think in today's session, let's try the comment method on an entire test suite. So rather than using the chat interface, I'm going to test the other place that's not covered here. So we just wrote the test for get context. This should turn green when I commit these, and let's do that in just one moment. The other place is the serve method, which this is essentially a Django view. So let's see if we can prompt GitHub Copilot only using essentially inline comments, Python comments, and having the imports in the context as well. It really looks at what's in the existing file that's open, any things that have been imported, previously written code, patterns. I think to some extent it might even look at across buffers. So if you have something open in a tab, but I'm not able to really confirm that. That's just from watching a video on the GitHub Copilot YouTube channel or something similar. All right, so let's commit these. These are pretty good. Now I did change the models. What did I change here? Oh yeah, it's because I had a bug in my code. So writing these unit tests helped me find a bug. Yes, this is correct. If the form instance is not already there, we're going to create a new form instance. For whatever reason, the code runs. I think Django's framework is resilient enough to know that I'm passing in a class instance and then instantiates that for me. So it helped me avoid a foot gun because of the fact I'm using a relatively mature batteries included framework. That's just reminding me, like a reminder of why to try to find a mature framework when doing these things, not only for ease of development, but also the fact that they're in the large language models awareness, you could say, because there's a lot of data, a lot of open source code that the models have been trained on using these frameworks that have been around for years or a decade, in the case of Django and Ruby on Rails, for example. Whereas some of these fly-by-night frameworks that are only a couple months old or only have a few core contributors and maybe not so many open source applications in the wild, the results you'll get from the large language models would probably be lacking. The best I can, guess. I mean, it just seems statistically like that would be the case. More training data means better results, as you can see from the success of the larger frontier models with like billions of parameters, or even maybe a trillion parameters in the case of GPT-4. So that's essentially a bug. I'll call it that, instance bug. That was surfaced through my test case. That was explained to me in very clear and simple terms by GPT-4, and I would imagine Copilot could also explain that. Test case, really cool stuff though. I'm stoked about this. I hope we don't nerf these models to the point of being useless, and I hope this copyright stuff shakes out, that they're training the data models on vast amounts of data, some of which is openly published, some of it is full copyright restricted. We'll distinguish the model from the actual contents of the copywritten materials. As we know, a model is essentially a compressed version of knowledge. It's a graph of weighted probabilities between words and concepts. It's not the content itself, which I think is very hard for us to disentangle because the output can seem so close to other outputs that it may have been trained on, human outputs, in other words. All right, let's go back to the main topic is just coding. Let's keep coding, but it is interesting stuff to think about. And back to Jean-Michel Rojas's question, the comment method is better. Is it Rojas? I think that's what I'm curious about. How do you pronounce your last name? Oh, did I not stage anything? And the middle name. My brother's name is Michael. We call him Michael, but then I also see Michel as a proper way to pronounce that name. Hey, oh, there it is right here. So essentially we've done that. John Michael Rojas seems good. All right, we'll publish our branch so we can check it out. But yeah, you should, people mispronounce my name all the time. It's a very strange name, Brylie, B-R-Y-L-I-E, you know? It's kind of a fairly unique name, unique spelling. All right, now we're gonna test this serve method. And it doesn't bother me when people say different things. Call me Brian or Bryce and all sorts of things. It's like, all right. So now we've got a pull request open. That'll let the continuous integration pipeline run and give me a little bit of an update on our test coverage. Very cool. Now we're going to check the additional prompting approach. We've already got a subscription index page test kind of suite. So I'd like to slot in the serve the view test underneath this. So I think they're relevant, slightly closely coupled, and we've already got the instance here. I don't know how this view test is going to work. This one I'm going to ask for some help from GPT. Let me get a quick drink of water. I'll be right back. Okay, we have a suggestion from Copilot there. It's not quite right, but actually I'm going to lean into this one when I get back, because we tested the form without any data. Now we need to make sure that the form data is preserved. So actually this is a good suggestion from Copilot already. I didn't prompt it with anything but the existing code. I'll be right back. All right, very cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's Rojas. That's what I was thinking. Hey, what's up, the movies house? Welcome to the channel. How are you doing today? All right, so yeah, I'm gonna hit tab here. Did you notice I just put it on a blank line within my test case? Whoops, my alarm clock went off here. And we're gonna do this real quick. So it knows I'm in a test case for this subscription index page. It's suggesting that I test with the existing form data. So we're gonna go with that. One moment, I had a reminder here. I'm going to follow up with my reminder. Hey, we've got it. So now I gave it a pause. It's suggesting that I write the following code. We'll hit tab on that and scroll down a bit. I'm not sure what the delay on the YouTube video. Hey, oh, Fike, welcome to the channel. All right, so now we've got a partial test written. And what it's doing here is preparing, we've got a mock HTTP request and some subscription data that it's gonna use to populate the form. Self-user, let me make sure that's it. We don't have a setup case, so that's incorrect. We can see now our first example of the model inferring some code that doesn't exist. We can fix that though, and the red squiggles are a good indicator, although they're not always reliable. Then we create an instance of the subscription create form with the pre-populated data and a mock HTTP request. Create the form, and then we call the get context function with this request. but the get context doesn't take an argument. So the code needs to, I need to update the code a little bit here. Attach the form into the HTTP request. All right, but it's pretty good so far. I'm going to continue and see what it does. Check the assertions it makes. Context form, initial field and value. For field value and subscription data items. So it's just checking that for each of these items, the value matches, essentially. All right. So we can see, let's just see if it makes any other assertions. And then it goes on to check the price components, which is out of scope for this current test. Subscription index page, get context with form data. All I care about really is the form data. All right, so I would say, you know, I would give a Copilot right 7 out of 10 on this one. Pretty good. It saved me some time. So that right there is worth the price of admission. But I need to then make a couple of changes. So we need a self-user. Either I need to create a user in this context or just add a setup method. So let's do setup. And it knows that, and there it is, it knows that I want to do a self-user. So that's pretty cool. So that gets Copilot's score back up to 8 out of 10. But it is a Copilot, it needs somebody to pilot. Hey Fike, is views important to you? It is when you're a Django or a web developer in general, because the view is essentially what presents information to the user. Depending on the architecture of if you're using a framework or if you've invented your own framework, you're going to be using this concept. It's either you built up your own framework of conventions and code practices and stuff, or you're using an existing framework of conventions and code practices, or somewhere in between those. Typically, you know, you might be deviating from certain of the conventions in Ruby on Rails or Django or Laravel. But nonetheless, we're always in the context of a framework, whether or not we want to admit that. Even in micro framework land, you're still constructing a framework around that micro framework. So back to your question on view, my understanding is that without the view, the user can't see anything, right? There's nothing there. So it's very important to the user, which might be you or me. Yeah, and how you get the view and stuff like that is another question, but where the data comes from, how it's manipulated, what's the pipeline, all those things. For example, in typical Django applications, you'll define a views.py that is your views. And in this app, we have some of the views defined that way, but with Wagtail views, they're actually attached to the model, the data model itself. This is our model for a page where people will subscribe to the magazine, basically in an e-commerce environment. Some other model properties, but here's our view function that's serving. You could swap this out as a Django view. It's literally the same signature, except it has a self. Django views, unless you're using class-based views, don't have self. So function-based views wouldn't have self. It takes a request and it returns a response. That's a view. It's as simple, no matter what, if you're using Node.js or Laravel, the user requests something and gets something back. So in terms of web development, can't really, to my knowledge, develop without views. I'm going a little bit long on this, sorry, but yeah, just to clarify the importance of this concept. Okay, so back to the code. Now we know the user exists, so this is red squiggly kind of white. Let's look at this form. In our test, the function we're testing here is get context. All it receives is an HTTP request and some args and kwargs. So let's check keyword arguments. Arguments are just unnamed things that come in, and keyword arguments it's essentially, as you can see, a dictionary of key value pairs if you're not familiar with Django or Python view functions. The context here is separate. It's we get this from the super. This is a class object-oriented based paradigm, so we're calling the parent class and getting dictionary, which is essentially all the data that's going to go into the view. which renders a response for the user. So we're taking a request and we're passing out a dictionary. So we're getting this context dictionary, and since the context is not defined here, it needs to be attached to the request. I think, right? Context. It's going to get the context from the request, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be the request. So I'm going to ask for some help from Copilot here. Form object. All right, let's just call it that. Mock HTTP request context, form is form. There we go. There we go. So that's essentially it. Now here you can see again prompting in context. And in a lot of cases, the comments that I'm giving to ChatGPT are also useful for a human reviewer, even though the mock HTTP request context form is kind of self-explanatory. Sometimes it might be good to have a descriptive and explanatory comment as well. Sometimes it's verbose and redundant. Like you basically are creating a subscription create form with subscription data. You know, it's like the comment is repeating the code. So some people might get annoyed by that. I'm going to leave these in because they were also the prompts that I gave to ChatGPT, or which through Copilot. But yeah, thanks for the question. Like that's a really important concept and something that's good to clarify particularly if you're a web developer. Okay, so now I think we can check our assertions. We'll just run this test suite again and see what errors we get, if any. Yes. Okay, so we did get a key error. What we'll need to do is dig into the subscription create form. If I hop over to where that's defined, the form data. We do have a recurring field, so that shouldn't be the case. And out of curiosity, it is the first field that it is checking. So what I'm thinking is that the data didn't get passed into the form. But here's where I would kind of turn to usually GPT-4. The chat interface can give me a little bit more explanation of why I'm getting this error. So what we can do, try the chat interface of Copilot. I think they're complementary. I'm not sure that the comment-oriented approach works in all cases. However, I could try a comment. Let's just paste it in. Weird. Let me double check here. Yeah, I'm in the right place. Oh yeah, I see what I did wrong. I need to give the chat interface some information about our error, right? This is the new context that's in the terminal. What does it do with that? Doesn't really know how to use it. So what I need to figure out is where in the line this is breaking down. It could be I'm instantiating a form here. The request should include that form in the context. So let's turn over to the chat interface and give it a bit more information. Let's try just the view function itself. Now granted, this is a Wagtail model, but it's behaving essentially like a Django view, the get context. So I can be a bit more generic, I think, with my prompt. All right. So then I get the following error. Let's see what the GPT says via Copilot. This will kind of give us an intuition if it's GPT-4 or 3. So I'm passing in the information, similarly how I've previously passed information into GPT-4. The error message indicates that the recurring key is not present in the initial dictionary of the subscription create form object stored in the context dictionary returned by the get context method in the subscription index page model. Okay, so that's how it usually starts. It responds by summarizing the situation as it understands it. The error could occur if the subscription create form class does not define a field name recurring, or if the field is defined but has a different name or is not included in the fields or exclude attribute of the form. When we looked at the form, it is defined and included in the fields, so we can rule that one out. To fix this error, you should check that the subscription create form class defines a field name recurring and that the field is included in the fields or exclude attribute of the form. If the field is missing and not included, such and such, make sure it's in the make sure it's included in the fields. So let's go ahead and say, here is the subscription create form definition. Now what I'm expecting is that it'll have say thank you for that information and sort of update its response. Saying, basically helping me troubleshoot this. The subscription create form definition provided includes a recurring field, and so the error you encountered earlier may have been caused by a different issue. Okay, so it's helping me now keep track of the situation, clarify the broader context, so it helps me think more concretely. One possibility, and then helps me troubleshoot. One possibility is that the initial dictionary of the subscription create form object is not being set correctly in the get context method of the subscription index page model. You should check that the initial dictionary of the form is being set correctly with the data from the subscription data dictionary. One thing I just thought of is the view gets the data from the post, or does it come in from the body? So the serve function comes in from the post. So a couple of things I'm thinking. One is, should I be testing there is this condition. So for one, does that condition need to be inside of the get context? Well, I'm preparing context, so it seems it's context related. It's making sure that I've got the right context. So this line of code, I believe, should exist in this scope. I'm not modifying the context outside of that scope. I'm validating a form that's coming in through a post request. All right, so I think that line of code is valid. So checking my assumptions, and I believe it should be covered in tests. That we create an empty subscription create form instance. If it's not already there. If it is there, we don't do anything with it. That comes to the next layer up. Do I need a test case for this? If both those are yes, if I need a test case for this, then I need to keep troubleshooting this. Let's ask GPT for its thoughts. Give me something to go with. Given the following view function, what are some considerations? So given the context of the view function, what are some considerations for whether I should test the case where a form attribute is already present in the context dictionary, such as where it wouldn't add an empty subscription create form instance? Should I include this in the test suite? So asking for some code advice here. So it is generally good practice to test all possible code paths in your application. So the code path would be that it skips over that. Right. Which would essentially be preserving the previous form. Okay. Including cases where form attribute is already present in the context dictionary. Yes, that's why the Copilot suggested I write this in the first place. This can help ensure that your code is working correctly and that there are no unexpected side effects, such as a side effect would be overriding the form with an empty create form instance, which would be problematic. Yeah, okay. In the case of the get_context method, you may want to test both cases where the form attribute is present and where it is not present in the context dictionary. By the way, this is sort of a GPT-4 level response. I'm not sure if we're working with GPT 3.5. I'm not very familiar with the 3.5, I've just been using 4, but I think this Copilot is giving us good results. The other thing I wanted to mention is Microsoft is a key investor in OpenAI. That's why I'm pretty sure this is GPT powered and probably GPT-4, which is now generally available. I think so, based on all those considerations. The test case where the form attribute already present in the context dictionary, you can create a mock request object and set the form attributes In the context dictionary, before calling the getContext method, you can then check the form attribute in the returned context dictionary is the same as the one in the mock request object. Okay, so now we have just a fully fleshed out test. This is going way above and simply helping me figure out whether to write the test, right? It's already showing me how to do it. This is why I think these are so important. Oh, I get a phone call coming in. I will be right back. All right, thanks for waiting. Sorry for the delay there. I lost the YouTube viewers, but had a phone call from an important person. So there we are. So back to it. The response here I got was more than I was anticipating, and it might highlight some errors with the previous way I prompted it and got an error essentially. There's probably some code here, so it was missing the broader context. But this is much more extensive test I can see. Let's see if we can spot the difference. So we've, and then I'll use it. So we've got an index page. We create a mock request with a request factory. That's a different approach there instead of using the spec. We get our data. It's pretty much the same. John Woolman, Western Friend, 123 Main Street. So this is an interesting observation. In the chat interface, somehow Copilot is also aware of my context. I didn't know that before. The fact that we're using, it's got the, like the object structure, we're using particular names, an organization name, an address, and all of that. So this chat interface is integrated with the IDE and hence is able to look into the tabs I've got open, perhaps the active tab. I'm not sure if I had a different tab focused, if it would get a different response. Cool. All right, so then we create the form with the data and we attach it to our mock request context. This is very similar, but in the other case we had mocked it here instead of making it via a request factory, so that's slightly different. Perhaps then we're asserting that it's we don't probably need to, let's see, what are we doing? Context. We're running the factory with the request to get the response. We don't need to assert about the price components. That's not what we're after, but the context form should be a subscription create form. Okay. and checking that each field, the initial field value equals the expected value from this subscription data items. So items gets us a key value in return. And then it's checking that the recurring field is present. It seems like this should already be covered here as well. But I think it's taking special care of the recurring because in the question I gave it the error about recurring. And it's actually giving me the converse test case where it's that doesn't make sense. This is still where it's already present in the context dictionary. It's a bit confusing, but maybe it's right. So I think, well, then what we need, it's essentially the same test. Unfortunately, I don't think I got a different result. Bummer, dude. Bummer. Let's try it out, though. It's slightly different because the request factory, which I'll need to import. And let's just run this one test specifically, and then I'm going to have to head out because I got some yoga to go to. Yoga day. Recurring's not there, so yeah, something. It's going wrong. So this might be a shortcoming of the Copilot approach. After yoga, I'll come back, I'll do episode 16, and we'll see if we can get this test written. As Copilot points out, this is an important test case. It's a code path that's in our get context method or whatever, so it needs a proper test. Unfortunately, I can't get the result I'm looking for. Let's see if ChatGPT version 4 helps us a little bit later. Alright, this has been another episode of Tech with Briley. Thanks for stopping by the live stream. John Michael Rojas, thanks for the conversation about GPT-4 and Copilot. Thanks Movie House and Fayak for stopping by, and Fayak for the good question about the importance of views in modern web development. There's my final reminder of the yoga class. Thanks for your time. Hope you're doing well, and I'll see you around the stream. Have a great day.